How to make gunpowder when the world is dead. The night is louder than the day, and you've got exactly 2 bullets left and a neighbor who's looking at you like dinner. Scenario setup. Here's the thing about the end of the world. It's not like the movies. No swelling violins. No sweeping wide shots of crumbled cities. No slow-motion monologues. The power went out 187 days ago. My watch is still running because I learned a long time ago to trust gears and springs, not lithium batteries that rot faster than a corpse in July. The last radio transmission I heard was a looped distress call in Spanish. I don't speak Spanish, but the screaming in the background? That translated just fine. The gas stations are burned husks, stripped for copper wiring. The only water left that doesn't taste like a 9-volt battery is rainwater caught in cracked satellite dishes. I'm making gunpowder, and you're coming along for the ride. Why this matters? Gunpowder is the passport through the apocalypse. It's not just for shooting. It's for scaring people off. It's for starting fires when the cold's trying to chew through your bones. It's for signaling when you're bleeding out in the dirt and need someone to save you, or at least come pick up your body before the dogs do. Without gunpowder, you're just another desperate meat sack with a stick. With gunpowder, you're a desperate meat sack who's a little harder to kill. That's all you can hope for out here. The big disclaimer, sort of. Look, I'm not telling you this because it's safe. It's not. In fact, if you do this wrong, one of 2 things will happen. You'll lose your eyebrows. You'll lose your hands. Or both. If you're lucky, you'll just start a small fire. If you're really lucky, you'll just inhale enough toxic fumes to shave a few years off your already short lifespan. But in the wasteland, luck is cheap. It's the knowledge that matters. So listen close. Setting the scene for the build. We're going to need 3 things. Something that burns fast, that's potassium nitrate, but we're not just going to stroll into a chemistry shop and buy it, are we? Something that burns even faster, that's charcoal, and unless you're somehow surrounded by lush forests that haven't been eaten by scavengers for fuel, you're going to have to get creative. And something sticky to hold it all together and make the bang. That's sulfur, the fun yellow stuff that smells like someone boiled rotten eggs in a rusty can. The disaster. I'll be honest, the first time I tried this after the world went dark, it went badly. I was working in what used to be the back room of a pet store. Not because it was a good workshop, but because the walls were still intact and the smell of hamster bedding covered the stench of human decay in the street. I'd scavenged some black crumbly stuff from the bottom of a rusted-out chimney, figured, hey, that's charcoal, right? Spoiler, it was not. It was just soot. And soot does not burn, it smothers. For potassium nitrate, I cracked open an old sack of fertilizer from a half-collapsed barn. Thought I struck gold. Nope. The rain had soaked through it, and all I had was a soggy lump of useless sludge that smelled like mold and regret. And sulfur? Didn't even get that far. I thought the yellow crust around an old car battery was close enough. It wasn't. It was just a quick way to get a rash that looked like I'd wrestled a jellyfish in a swamp. When I mixed it all together, I got mud. Just mud. And when I tried to light it, nothing. Well, not nothing. It did catch a spark for about half a second, before making a smell so bad I thought my lungs were going to pack up and leave. Lesson learned, you can't fake the chemistry. And the apocalypse doesn't give do-overs. The plan this time. We're doing it right. We're finding real potassium nitrate, real charcoal, and real sulfur. We're grinding them, mixing them, testing them. And when we're done, we're going to load it into something that'll make a noise loud enough to keep the night things away. It's not going to be clean. It's not going to be safe. But it's going to work. Not when you're elbow deep in prehistoric horse crap. Making charcoal, when trees are gone. Charcoal used to be easy, you just burned wood in a low-oxygen setup. But out here, every tree thicker than your wrist has been burned for warmth or ripped apart for makeshift barricades. So I had to improvise. First, I raided a furniture store that had half collapsed. Dragged out the remains of a heavy oak table, splintered and blackened from fire damage. Looks good. Burns slow. Second, I found an old oil drum behind what used to be a car mechanic's shop. It was full of something thick and black, probably motor oil sludge, but I didn't care. I chopped the wood into chunks with a hatchet that was more rust than steel. Threw the chunks into the oil drum. Then, here's the trick, you burn it but don't let it breathe. You want heat but not full flames. So I lit a fire around the drum, fed it scraps of broken chairs, and let the heat cook the wood inside for hours. When I finally cracked the lid, I had deep black chunks of pure charcoal. Perfect. Except one piece was still glowing. And I learned very quickly that glowing charcoal will set your pants on fire if you carry it in a canvas bag. Sulfur, the real treasure. If potassium nitrate is white gold, sulfur is the yellow devil. It's out there hiding in two main places. Abandoned match factories, good luck finding one. The crusty yellow deposits near old volcanic vents or geothermal areas, good luck surviving that. I went for the third option, scavenging the guts of dead industry. Sulfur can be found in old electrical transformers, certain chemical drums, and here's a nasty one, in the residue of industrial pest control products. I found mine in a warehouse that looked like it had been bombed twice. Inside, stacked against a wall, were a dozen dented metal barrels labeled in faded black letters. Sulfur powder, industrial use. Problem. The powder had clumped into rock-hard bricks from moisture. Solution. Smash it apart with a crowbar, collect the fine dust, and try not to breathe too deep unless you want to cough up yellow for a week. First mix, the test batch. Here's where the science, and the danger, get spicy. You don't just dump the three powders together and hope for the best. That's how you lose a hand and make the rats inherit your gear. No, you grind them separately. Mortar and pestle style. And you don't use metal. Metal sparks. Sparks plus gunpowder equals a Darwin Award with your name on it. I used a ceramic bowl I'd borrowed from the ruins of a diner and a piece of smooth river rock as my grinder. First, grind the charcoal into the finest dust possible. The finer it is, the faster it burns. Then grind the sulfur, slowly, because the dust is nasty in your lungs. Potassium nitrate? That's the stubborn one. It's crystalline, so it takes real work to powder it. My arms ached for hours after that first batch. I wasn't about to risk my face on the first try. So I scraped together a small pile of the mix, about the size of a bottle cap, on a cracked brick in the alley. Lit it with a match from as far back as I could reach. It fizzed. Then whoosh, bright flash, quick burn, clean smoke. No explosion yet, but the chemistry was right. And somewhere in the distance, I swear I heard something scurrying away in the dark. That's the thing about making noise in the wasteland, you don't just scare off trouble. You also tell it where to find you. The long build, from powder to power. Tuning the recipe. See, the first pile of fizzbang was cute, but cute doesn't keep the stalkers off your back. Gunpowder's not just gunpowder, the ratio matters. Too much charcoal? Slow burn. Too much sulfur? Smoky mess. Too much nitrate? Violent burn, but unstable as hell. The classic mix? 75 parts potassium nitrate, 15 parts charcoal, 10 parts sulfur. But in the wasteland, you're not working with clean lab-grade chemicals. You're working with crud scraped off barn walls, table legs, and rusted drums. So my first job? Test, adjust, test again. I made 3 microbatches. Batch A, heavy on the charcoal, for slower burn, safer handling. Batch B, the balanced formula, theoretically optimal. Batch C, nitrate heavy, fast burn, dangerous edge. I lined them up on a plank outside my hideout, lit each one in turn. Batch A gave me a lazy poof. Batch B gave me a sharp thwump and a kick of heat. Batch C? That one startled the pigeons 2 blocks over and left me with ringing ears. Guess which one I decided to pursue? Yeah, the dangerous one. The wet method, not blowing up while mixing. Dry mixing powders is a great way to turn your entire workspace into a fireball. So instead, I went with the wet method, adding water to make a damp paste before combining the ingredients. Picture this. A cracked enamel pot, the powders inside, drizzled with just enough water to turn it into something between mud and dough. You knead it. Slowly. Carefully. No metal tools. Just your hands wrapped in rag gloves. The dampness stops sparks. It also means the final product has to be dried, and drying flammable material in the wasteland is an art form. Too much sun? It ignites. Too much shade? It molds. So I spread it thin on a sheet of scavenged roofing tin, left it in a warm spot behind a collapsed wall, and kept watch. Not for fire, but for people. Gunpowder in progress is like a neon sign for anyone desperate enough to kill for it. The granulation game. Once the paste dried, it wasn't powder anymore. It was a crumbly cake. You can't just shove that into a weapon. It needs to be granulated so it burns evenly. The finer grains were for priming, fast ignition. The coarser ones were for main charges. I stored them in scavenged glass jars with cork stoppers. Never plastic. Plastic sweats in the heat, and moisture kills powder faster than a bullet. The beast. Now here's the dangerous part, turning the stuff into ammo. Step 1. Clean out the old residue with a nail and a rag. Step 2. Measure in just enough powder to fill about 2/3 of the casing. Eyeballing it? Bad idea. That's how you turn a gun into a pipe bomb in your hands. Step 3. Seat the bullet head, scavenged from an old stash I found under a collapsed porch, and crimp it in place. No press? No problem. I used the edge of an old vise, a mallet, and a lot of swearing. The first live round. I wasn't about to fire it from my shoulder. I've seen what happens when DIY ammo backfires. Imagine holding a grenade right next to your face. So I rigged up what I call the idiot's friend, a test rig made from a length of steel pipe, duct tape, and a length of string. Loaded the round into my old single-shot rifle, propped it on the rig, hid behind a wall, pulled the string. The sound was glorious. Sharp, clean, echoing through the ruins. The casing kicked out smoking and the target, an old tin bucket, now had a jagged hole where daylight shone through. I laughed, but too loud. Because laughter carries. And in this world, noise is just another way of saying I'm here. The science and survival. The chemical dance. Gunpowder might look like a dead, dusty mix of dirt, soot, and sulfur, but inside, it's a tiny chemical war. When you light it, the potassium nitrate, that salt I scraped from walls, instantly dumps oxygen into the mix. That oxygen feeds the charcoal, which is basically pure carbon, and the sulfur acts as a speed booster, lowering ignition temperature and making the reaction go from flicker to bang. The magic is in the gas. Solid ingredients burn, gas expands, and the sudden expansion shoves air, or a bullet, out of the way in a hurry. That's your boom. No gas expansion? No boom. Just a sad hiss and the smell of regret. Tweaking the burn. Once you understand the science, you stop thinking of gunpowder as one thing and start thinking of it as a tunable engine. More charcoal equals slower burn, more smoke. Good for signals, bad for stealth. More nitrate equals faster, hotter burn. Good for weapons, risky for your eyebrows. Less sulfur equals harder to ignite but more stable in storage. I started making specialty batches. Flash mix for blinding light in a pinch. Signal powder with extra smoke for rescue or distraction. Hot mix for maximum force in minimal space. Failures that almost ended me. Science is a polite word for controlled disaster. And when the control slips, one night I got cocky. Tried making a double-strength batch for testing. My ratio was way off. I lit a pinch of it on my tin test plate, and it didn't just burn. It detonated. The shockwave cracked a bottle behind me. My ears rang for 2 days. The blast left black scorch marks that are still there, like the ruins are laughing at me. Another time, I dried a wet batch too close to my oil lamp. Bad move. The fumes ignited, and I had to fling the whole tray into the dirt and stomp it out. I can still smell the burnt hair when I think about it. Lesson: gunpowder doesn't care if you're tired, cold, or in a hurry. It just is. Treat it wrong, and it reminds you why people feared it for centuries. Making it multi-purpose. Fire starting. Sprinkle a pinch under damp kindling, spark it, instant flame, no fuss. Flares. Mix in metal shavings, aluminum, magnesium if you're lucky, and you've got airborne daylight for a few seconds. Every time I find a new use, I write it down in a notebook made from scavenged ledger paper. That notebook is worth more than food. The moral dilemma. Here's the thing. In a dead world, gunpowder isn't just a tool. It's a currency. A jar of it can buy you a sack of grain, a bottle of clean water, or a night without fear. It can also make you a target. You don't hand this stuff out lightly, because the minute someone else has it, they can turn it on you. Out here, trust burns faster than powder. Part 5, the cliffhanger. The big idea. You ever get that itch in your skull, the kind that whispers, what if you went bigger? I had enough powder to fill a coffee tin. Enough to light half the block if I was stupid enough to try. And then I found it. A crumbling old bridge, rusted supports, chunks missing, but still spanning the river like a broken tooth in the mouth of the city. Why the bridge? Because across that river was a stash I'd been watching for months. A military supply crate wedged between collapsed concrete, guarded by nothing but distance and the fear of drowning in the dark water below. I couldn't swim it, but I could drop the bridge. The plan. If I could collapse one section, it would fall into the river, making a jagged, half-submerged walkway. Dangerous? Stupid? Also yes. But in the wasteland, stupid and alive beats smart and starving. I spent the night packing the powder into makeshift charges, rusted tin cans, wrapped in cloth, sealed with melted wax to keep moisture out. I scavenged old wires from a busted radio, rigged them to a salvaged car battery, and tested the spark. Porked, bright, mean, and hungry. The night before, I didn't sleep. Kept thinking about all the ways this could go wrong. The powder could misfire. The bridge could collapse the wrong way. The noise could attract every scavenger within a mile. But the thought of that supply crate, sealed cans, maybe ammo, maybe medicine, kept me going. The moment. Dawn was bleeding into the sky when I set the charges. My hands were shaking, not from the cold but from knowing I was either about to change my life or end it. I ducked behind a chunk of fallen concrete, pressed the battery leads to the wire, and nothing. For one horrible second, I thought the whole thing had failed. Then a hiss. A spark.